Welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at string formatting in Python. We're in essence going to be bringing the stringy bits together. So of course in Python you have strings, but you also have other data types. So you know that if you try this, you'll get a type error. So the reason is that here, instead of being an addition sign, it's a concatenation sign, which is where you join score and 3. And you can't do that because you can't add strings and integers, but instead you can cast 3 to a string, and in that way you can add them. The old way of doing this was using mod notation, which you see in C, and so you've got score %sign D, and that would be, for example, an S if it was a string, and then mod and then 3. The new way of doing this is using these curly braces and using dot format, and there it will put the 3 in between the two curly braces. So we'll start off by looking at casting, and this is where we just convert each individual element into a string. And a couple of things to notice are that the built-in function print has a special string method, and that the string of a dictionary uses single quotation marks, because if it used double quotation marks it wouldn't work in a string. Then we'll have a look at the dot format function. So you get a string and then you use dot format and then you put in some values. And it's also worth noting that anything you want to be formatted, you use curly braces. So 0 is referring to the 0th value, 1 the first one, 2 the second one. Then in the second one, we're not saying which one we want it to refer to, but it's implied that it goes 0, 1, and then 2. In this example, we're reversing it 2, and then 1, and then 0. But the interesting one is here, where we're using the spill, and we're spilling a string, a bit like spilling a list, so that this becomes this, and then we put that in there. And then in the last one, we're referring to the 0th one, the first one, and then the 0th one again, so we get abracadabra. It's also worth noting that the reason these use single quotation marks instead of double is because I've taken this off the documentation website. So this is completely accurate, but it does mean that I haven't wanted to replace all the single quotation marks with doubles. And that is exactly as we expected. ABC, ABC for these two, and then reversing it, and then abra, cad, abra. You can also, instead of using numbers, you can use words or other phrases as keys, because in the same way you can think of a list as a dictionary with the natural numbers as keys, you can think of a dictionary as a dictionary. So here we're saying that the latitude is equal to this value, the longitude is equal to this value, and so here instead of referring to 0 and 1, we're referring to latitude and then longitude. Then we're defining a dictionary here of the coordinates. Then here we're using the double star to spill and generate keyword arguments, so this is a lot like that. We run it and we should get the same thing twice. Another thing is that inside the curly brackets you can put exclamation marks followed by RS or A, and as it says here, repr shows quotes and string doesn't. And we can see repr here has put the quotes in the string, whereas string has not, it's just left them out. Inside you can also align things. So here we've got a colon, and then we've got left, which is this arrow here, and then 30 because we want the width of the whole thing to be 30. Here right, and then 30, and here center. The only difference here is instead of just putting a colon and a sign, we've put a star, and we're saying here that we want the star to be the things that fills out everything else. So if we run all these, we can see this is left aligned, this is right aligned, this is centered, and this is also centered, but it's got a star. And the reason that this works so well is because this is a monospace font. And that means that every letter has exactly the same width. It's in essence like rows and columns. Whereas if you take most fonts, the I character, for example, is wider than the M. You can also decide whether to do signs. So plus F means always show the signs. Space F means show a space if it's positive and a negative sign if it's negative. Then minus F is only show signs if you want it to be negative. So we run that, and so we've got the plus and the minus where we've shown both sides, the space and the minus where we've said only show a space, and then nothing and then a minus where we said only show if it's negative. Then you can also print different bases. So here we're taking the number 42, printing it out as an integer, a hexadecimal number, an octadecimal number, and a binary number. And the difference that this hashtag makes is it will put something just before the string so that you can see that it actually is binary. So if we run that, you see here it's got 0b, which is binary, 0o, which is oct, and 0x, which is hex. You can also use comma separators, and again you have the colon and then you have a comma. So we're taking this number 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0 and putting commas in where the thousands places would go, and there we go. You can also do percentages, so the colon and then the dot is saying that we want it to have 2 decimal places and it's a percentage sign, so convert this number, which will be a decimal less than 1 greater than 0 because it's 19 divided by 22, and it will convert that into a percentage for us with 2 decimal places. And so there we've got 86.36 instead of 0.8636. You can also have type specific ones, so the date time module is a good example, and this just defines some date in 2010, and it has its own special formatting thing that you can use, and mod Y is for the year, mod M is because it's lowercase the month, mod D is a date, and then hour, minutes and seconds, and then because they've defined how they want it to be formatted, it will format it in a certain way. As we can see, it's 2010, 7, 4, 12, 15, 58. And so here are a few final examples. First I shall count to, and then here we've got 0, and it's referring to the 0th argument there, which is 10 because it's the only one. Here we've got nothing, and it will just refer to chair because that's the argument. From, to, and in between we've got curly braces, and the first one refers to the 0th argument and the second one to the first argument. Then again we've got keyword arguments where we're referring to name. We've got something slightly different going on here where we're taking the 0 argument and then referring to it using format. So we're saying take the 0 thing in here and then look at the key weight. And the reason this doesn't have quotation marks around it is because it's already inside a string. And then finally, units destroyed. We're taking the players and then taking the 0th thing. And so we can see the answer is 10. And we can run that and see, first I shall count to 10, bring me a chair from A to B. My quest is learning Python. The weight in tons is 10 and the units destroyed is 10. So that was quite a lot of information, and there are quite a lot of ways when you might not use this. It's really useful to know though for making stuff look really nicely formatted. Hopefully you've enjoyed this lesson, you've learnt something, and I'll see you again same time next week. Till then.